Hey guys, Sean here. Welcome to the F1 Word Podcast, episode number 3. And have we got some juicy topics to sink our teeth into this week? First off, though, we will start with the usual housekeeping. Don't forget you can listen to this podcast over on SoundCloud and Spotify. Links are in the description down below, as well as links to the usual social media, really, and the links as well to the channels of my two guests today. And I have got two with us today, which is going to be absolutely awesome. Like I say, loads to talk about. It's pretty much going to be a speculation podcast today. So I know a lot of you aren't overly keen on speculation, but yeah, it's all part of Formula One and something we do enjoy. But we're going to start by saying a very good afternoon, or morning, I think this will be technically, because it's going out Saturday morning, to Stuart. Thanks again for coming along, mate.
Good morning, I guess. Hi, Sean.
Feels weird saying that on a Friday afternoon, doesn't it? Morning. Are you ready for this one? A bit of speculation. I was just saying at the start, a lot of people don't like talking about gossip, but it is something that is part of F1 and we've got to really sink our teeth into it.
Well, it seems to be starting earlier and earlier each year, doesn't it? But yeah, I think it's worth just touching on a few things because, like it or lump it, people are going to be talking about this kind of stuff all year.
Yeah, it's a bit of a mad week, actually, in terms of rumour. And we'll also say a very good afternoon, or like I say, going out on Saturday, so possibly morning, to Aarava. Thank you very much for coming along, mate. A pleasure to have you on, finally.
Yeah, happy to be here, mate. Thank you for having me on. And yeah, I mean, looking forward to some juicy discussions with the topics we've got planned on for this one.
Yeah, it involves Ferrari. It's always going to get juicy, isn't it? When
yeah,
you involve
definitely.
Ferrari.
Always, mate.
We'll hop straight into it then, and we'll just go straight to the top rumour. I'm going to use his real name. Last time we were talking about him, I referred to him as everyone's favourite 21st century journalist, Joe. But Joe Saywood, found a rumour in Monaco that started to surface that Sebastian Vettel is apparently considering retirement from F1 at the end of this season. Apparently, he went on to talk about how he tried to bring Ferrari back to success, but he made several mistakes, I'm quoting now, and is now under pressure after the arrival of Charles Leclerc, younger and apparently with more growth margin than the German, a choice that in some ways would follow that of Nico Rosberg, who left F1 after winning the title in 2016, aware of the fact that he would hardly succeed in the enterprise again. Ouch. First impressions on that, Stuart. Vettel to retire at the end of 2019, is this utter nonsense, or do you think there's some truth behind this?
I mean, yeah, first things, we've got to always be wary when there's just one source, and at the moment, this has only come from Joe Saywood, who, people have mixed opinions about, but it isn't always pulling things completely out of nowhere. But again, this is something we sort of very broadly speculated about going into this season. We were like, if Leclerc comes along and, hands Vettel his backside, would Vettel start to get uncomfortable and think about moving on? Because we've been talking for a little while about both Hamilton and Vettel making exit strategies over the next few years. So it's really hard to judge the veracity of this. But what we did see before with Vettel was he had a young driver come in and join him at Red Bull and then left the next season. So it's not out of character for him, and he doesn't look very happy at the moment this year. But it's really hard to judge where Joe's hearing this rumour from.
Yeah, what do you reckon, Aarava? He's not had the best start to the season, but then Ferrari haven't as a whole, have they, really? So can't really pin it all on Vettel with this one.
No, I mean, it's not. The rumor itself's not entirely surprising in terms of the statement. I feel like maybe a year or so ago it would have been a wild accusation, but now I don't know. Yeah, Vettel hasn't seemed too happy. He's also said stuff in interviews trying to think back to the one he had with Martin Brundle on Sky about he doesn't really care for legacies, doesn't really mind if he doesn't leave a legacy behind because he feels like, these days with technology, things move so fast, so you kind of get forgotten about, which I kind of disagree with because I think with F1, it's a sport. With any sport, you kind of get written into the history books. So I don't think anyone's going to forget his 4 world titles, but he himself feels that way. So I don't think it's out of the question for him to retire in the next 2 to 3 years. This year, though, I would be still a bit shocked, to be honest, because even though it's maybe in character, like Sue said, it's I don't know, it would feel like a jerk reaction, really, I think. You can tell over the years, it's from this whole Ferrari stint's worn him down. He looks he just looks tired these days, doesn't he?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. So when you go back to his Red Bull days, he was quite happy-go-lucky, wasn't he? And he was really happy to chat to the media, always smiling. I think Martin Brundle took a joking shot at him in 2008, I think it was, in Monza, sort of talking about how he needs to stop being so happy because he's going to upset journalists and things like that. So he's changed a lot at Ferrari, but I think he's been ground down. I think the pressure gets to him I'm not going to lie, at Ferrari, I think the pressure really gets him.
It must be a pressure cooker. It must be such a, like, you know, from both ends of, like, you know, the track side to, you've got like the top bosses coming in and visiting on certain race weekends or back in the factory. You've got the fans that are, well, let's not. I don't want to get into talking about Ferrari fans on Twitter because that's a touchy subject. But I mean, they're like, what, you know, they're so up and down every single race weekend on how they want to support their drivers. So yeah, it must be a lot of mental strain on him, let alone Leclerc also coming in.
It's been a very turbulent time for Ferrari because they're clearly desperate for results, and they've been firing and hiring people in management to try and find something that works, and they're suffering from this Mercedes dominance, and they just can't seem to find a way in. They can't get themselves all pointing as cleanly as Mercedes are. And I think if Ferrari was suffering a bit, but the sport looked a bit different, like, because clearly, I say clearly, but probably Vettel is not going to be able to like slide into a Mercedes seat. He won't be able to kind of wiggle his way in there. So if he's looking at, do I keep struggling under Ferrari for the next couple of years, or do I just call it a day? I tried my best, but Ferrari's not going anywhere. He might think, I'm done now.
Maybe. I think I feel like he has unfinished business though, saying that, he said all this stuff about, not caring about the legacy he's leaving. I feel like he would want to stick with it because he's talked so much about his dream driving for Ferrari as a youngster. Obviously his idol was Schumacher. And so I feel like he's still, even though you can't tell maybe in recent interviews, I think he still holds that kind of, he realizes that it's a privilege right now that he's in a Ferrari car. So I feel like he might have some unfinished business, but like you said, the landscape of F1 is so locked in that he can't go anywhere exactly else. So if he was to kind of get fed up with Ferrari, to say, then it would literally just be retirement, which speaks a lot more about the sport really than maybe just him as well, to the entire situation. Like, it's Mercedes just have a chokehold, and unfortunately Ferrari, being the next best team, are getting the biggest brunt of that chokehold, basically, in terms of the criticism and kind of, everyone looking at them to try and be the guys that, beat the silver arrows.
I wonder if a lot of this hinges on Lewis Hamilton with Sebastian Vettel. I wonder if he starts to hear rumours that Lewis isn't going to renew his contract at the end of 2020, if he thinks, I can suck it up one more year at Ferrari and then maybe take that seat at Mercedes, because I can't see too much changing in 2021. Going really, really sceptical straight away with that one, Sean. But yeah, I can't see much changing in 2021 in terms of who the top three teams are going to be. So if a seat opens up at Mercedes, that could be an option for him. But I don't know. I think, what is it Jonty has always said? Vettel will continue until he manages to beat Schumacher's records or realises he's never going to do it. It's sort of how Jonty tends to word that one. And that's how I've always felt like 2024, for some reason, for Sebastian Vettel was when he would retire. But I don't expect we're going to hear anything concrete on this. Well, I don't think it'll happen this season. I'm going to be perfectly honest. I think he'll still be there in 2020. But very big if, he does decide to retire, we won't hear anything of Monza, because they like to do that at Monza. But I'm going to tell you why I don't read much into this. The list, I'm going to try not to laugh. The list of possible replacements, according to this rumour, include Sergio Perez, yeah, all right. Kevin Magnussen, good couple of years, yeah, I could see that. Bottas, if Mercedes ditch him, yeah, not a bad option. Roman Grosjean. Stuart. Roman flipping Grosjean for Sebastian Vettel. That's where this rumour falls apart for me.
Yeah, I mean, there was definitely a time when I saw a lot of potential in Roman Grosjean, and I thought he could go places, but it's sort of years have passed now, and he's okay, but still failing to deliver. And I wouldn't, he wouldn't be the person I was reaching to put in my top tier seat to go next to Charles Leclerc. And I think particularly now we've seen how important it is to have two solid drivers there. Perez and Magnussen, though, potentially. I even heard some people talking about, well, I don't know which way around this might be, but Ferrari might be interested in trying to court Lewis Hamilton to switch over, which the legacy of Ferrari in the sport is a very attractive option to someone like Hamilton, but he might not want to sit in that Ferrari if it still looks like a bit of a dog. So, interesting.
Yeah, but there's all those rumours anyway, wasn't there, that they were going to swap, that Hamilton would go to Ferrari and Vettel to Mercedes. So maybe put the two together and come up with 12. Maybe there is something in that, perhaps.
That kind of big move is so un-F1, though. I don't think it'll ever happen. Like, you never see two Goliaths of the sport swap seats like that, really, these days. And yeah, about the other rumours, I mean, Grosjean, he's been exposed by Magnussen now this last season in 2018. And to be fair, to a certain extent this season as well. So I don't think Grosjean's really got it in him to be in a top car. Perez, Magnussen, yeah, sure. But Even those aren't solid replacements really for someone like Sebastian. Even though a lot of people rip into Vettel, and Vettel, to be fair, has made so many mistakes recently, I still would have him over those two. Basically, if you're picking and choosing. So yeah, I'm gonna go with you. Like in terms of like, it's a huge if, but also there's a tinge of like, okay, I see why maybe.
If you were in charge, then let's put you in charge, Aarava. If you own Ferrari, you've got to pick your driver to replace Sebastian Vettel. No pressure. Who are you putting in that seat alongside Leclerc? Assuming Leclerc stays, we'll talk about him a bit more in a moment.
Well, Leclerc say, I don't know. Do I get a free pick of whoever? Like, I'm trying to think. Probably some drivers are off limits. I just can't get, because if there wasn't any off limits drivers, I would certainly try and court Verstappen as hard as I ever could. Because Verstappen and the Ferrari would be a tasty PR combo. Let alone, if they gave him a good car. But in terms of courting someone that maybe is realistic, I don't know. I honestly might go with someone like Perez if there's no one really left, because Perez was obviously on track to be in the kind of Ferrari line, and then he kind of left everything to go to McLaren, and then that didn't go too well. But he's kind of turned his career around and has turned back to a very, very solid point scorer. But there's not actually too many that come to mind. That's the thing. I think Ferrari are kind of, as a team, back themselves into a corner of there's not many options apart from maybe going back to Kimi Räikkönen if he still wanted it.
Red Bull last season had realised their young driver program had dried up, and there wasn't anyone ready to jump into Ricciardo's, because Gio isn't ready for a Ferrari seat next year.
No. He's still learning the ropes at Alpha. Like I hope for his sake, because he's a nice guy. I've always kind of enjoyed his drive, especially in the lower categories. But to be fair, he's really struggling right now. So he's nowhere near ready for a Ferrari seat, let alone maybe keeping the Alpha seat.
Yeah, I think you're right. Ferrari have sort of, I think if anything, this no matter how true a place this rumor comes from, it will sort of inject some sort of energy into the silly season now. I think people are going to start questioning that Sebastian Vettel seat, and then saying, well, if he goes, well, who can we get? Who will Ferrari take? Where can we move into our seat? In the same way that I think last year it was Daniel Ricciardo's move that kind of caused chaos.
I'm going to go full on speculation now. What if both retire? What if Hamilton and Vettel decide to call it a day at the end of this year? That is going to shake up, probably the biggest shake up we've seen in the driver market in...
That I thought last year going into this year was the biggest domino effect shake up. That would certainly top it, obviously, having those two retire at the same time. That would be a nightmare, I think, for Toto Wolff and Binotto, to try and see who they'd want in their seat. Because honestly, you can't they're just two gladiators of F1. I don't really see a like for like replacement. You're just kind of having to get a driver and hope that they can grow into that role, or hope that your second driver, i.e. Leclerc or Bottas, could step up and replace them as that team leader, because both of them have such raw speed, such big respect in the paddock as well, let alone on track. So it'd just be a nightmare. I can't really think of anyone, to be honest.
I don't know what you two think, but I think that would become a case of who can make the best offer for Max Verstappen. I think you just have a fight between those two teams to land Max.
Yeah. And he'd have his pick. It'd be Christmas for Max Verstappen.
Yeah, totally.
It's obviously all pure speculation. I don't think either driver, Hamilton or Vettel, are going to retire before the end of 2020. But I will say, actually, Stuart, what maybe gives this a bit of credibility is, if Ferrari continue as they are now, making the mistakes they are and not being able to deliver a car, does Vettel want to spend one more year with them, probably only fighting for third place at best in the Drivers' Championship?
I mean, that is a big question. He's been there since 2015. This is his fifth year in that Ferrari, and it hasn't gone the way he wanted. And again, as we said, part of it is due to this Mercedes dominance, but obviously part of that's Ferrari's fault, because it's their job to catch up. And they haven't been able to do it. For Mercedes have a slicker operation, and it's a tricky situation for Vettel, because he had these he basically went straight into F1 dominance. He had a sort of year with Toro Rosso where he had that win, which was really good for being in that lower team. Then he moved into Red Bull and vaguely fought for the championship. Had 4 championship wins in a row. Had a bit of a dodgy year, and then he's sort of been in this wilderness at Ferrari where he's had to struggle for the first time. And you're absolutely right. He hasn't seemed happy. He's been frustrated. I think the image I think of when I think of Vettel having an interview is scratching the back of his neck, because he just looks a bit frustrated and lost and not know what to say. So he plays his cards very close to his chest, doesn't he? He doesn't talk about retiring or being unhappy or moving elsewhere. He just kind of talks about being confused and unsure about the speed of the car. It's hard to get a feel for him, I think. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, just like that. Yeah, like you said, confused. I think he plays the PR card obviously a lot. Being Ferrari, he can't say a lot. Like if he can't like
Yeah.
really go in on them. I think he just frustration's the biggest word I think because I think like you said, he's so used to how Red Bull worked. I think he's gone to Ferrari and it worked. It kind of worked out in the first year. Had that win at Malaysia and the good feel vibe was there with Ferrari. And I think he really stepped into that role of like, okay, I'm going to be the one that leads this team to glory. And then the team have let him down more than him letting the team down. And then the roles kind of reversed. In the last year or so, he's started to make a lot of mistakes, let alone the team being bad anyways. And so that's just a double negative for them. Whereas obviously before, even if Vettel made a mistake at Red Bull, which he did a few times here and there, Red Bull were just so good as an operation that you could just kind of iron over it. So yeah, I think it's not only for Ferrari to question stuff. I think Vettel himself is just sort of like you say, confused, kind of just like floating there in no man's land of knowing what to do with his career now.
It's tough, and as we've all touched on, there's nowhere to go, is there? It's 3 teams. He's only got a chance of winning in 3 teams, and none of those look like they're going to be letting their number one driver go anytime soon. And Ferrari have got Charles Leclerc as their long-term plan. So I kind of feel a little bit for Seb. He gets a lot of stick on social media, as you've kind of touched on, Aarava, and I think, yeah, he's made mistakes. Yeah, he's been a bit dumb at times, but he's, whether people like it or not, he's a 4-time world champion, for Christ's sake. He deserves more respect than he gets.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, I think you can't forget the pedigree. And I know you can say what you want about the car dominance and whatever, but the Mercedes dominance being a lot worse than it was at Red Bull, really. We had some great seasons whilst Vettel was still winning his championships with Red Bull. I think it's just a different situation. And yeah, he's made mistakes, but every driver does. I feel like you just pinpoint it on more because it's Seb and it's Vettel. It's Seb and it's Ferrari. Like you just think of any Ferrari driver is going to come under scrutiny so much more because you have that many more, not even Italian fans, just fans of Ferrari as a brand that are like looking in, even casuals that just watch F1 here and there probably just look at Ferrari and go, what's happened here? Oh, their German drivers crashed. Cool.
Yeah, I mean, you say about the Mercedes dominance there. We won't talk about it too much. Obviously, we can do that another day. But out of the 106 races we've had since 2014, Mercedes have won 80. That's 8-0. That is dominance like we've never seen before, isn't it, Stuart? So where does he go if he doesn't retire and does decide to move on? So maybe there is a little bit of credibility to this.
Yeah, quite. And I think that Mercedes dominance also shows Ferrari and Vettel up a little bit more than maybe they would be. I know Vettel, second half of last season, he was making a lot of mistakes. He was spinning a lot, and I think it was clear he was under pressure. But most drivers and teams will make mistakes through the year. It's just, I think Mercedes have been so bulletproof that it makes everyone look like amateurs in comparison. They've just had such a solid run of things for the most part. So I think Vettel and Ferrari get a lot of stick, but I think they get more stick than maybe is deserved because Mercedes are just so shiny and brilliant at the moment, unfortunately. But yeah, with all that, yeah, like I think we touched on, Mercedes have this whole chokehold on the championship, and Vettel, when he reflects on what his options are, he may think there isn't really anywhere for him to go that will allow him to have enjoyment and success. But I tend to agree with both of you that it probably won't be the end of this year, but people have surprised us before.
Yeah, he's a family man as well, so it's worth throwing that into the mix. I wonder if that'll come into his thinking, but I think he's a racer first and foremost, so I don't know how much that plays a part. We'll move on from Sebastian Vettel to his teammate, Charles Leclerc. It's the Ferrari show. Apparently, Charles Leclerc is at his wit's end with Ferrari and is looking for a way out. This comes from Formula Passion, so I'm going to say this now. Take this with a huge pinch of salt because it starts with, according to reports in Italy. Whenever an article says that, I always take it with a big pinch of salt. Apparently, relations between Maranello and the managers who managed the Monegasque career, that was a mouthful, are already close to breaking point. Ferrari wanted Leclerc to cautiously make his way into the points, whereas he went into the Grand Prix with a risk-everything attitude in Monaco. Apparently, there is a silent revolt towards management for repeatedly penalising him, and that's why he broke these apparent team orders on Sunday. And the last line I'm going to read from it was, it was a, quote, scream that crossed the paddock and found ears ready to listen to it. In particular, the interest of top-level teams with potential availability took shape late on Sunday. Aarava, mate, that's nonsense. It's 6 races into his Ferrari career and 27 into his Formula One career. I mean, give him time. That's daft. He loves Ferrari. They've given him his chance, and it's his dream to be there. Why would he walk away?
Yeah, Leclerc at Ferrari that's a long term move. Like I just couldn't see it ever happening. Like I feel like Leclerc will be at Ferrari now for a minimum 5 years. Like this is a long term thing, a long term project. And yeah, like you said, he's only in his second full year in F1, so give him time to grow. He's basically having to grow and learn in front of the eyes of Ferrari fans in a top car. And yeah, he was very hot headed and a bit stupid at Monaco. You can't not point that out. But that's the whole thing. Like, he is still only that little into his career that these are the things where he needs to learn. Like, when in a top car, a top team, sometimes, yeah, you do want to throw everything in with passion, but sometimes you'd have to kind of just think logically about, okay, let's just make a nice conservative race into the points rather than chucking the kitchen sink at it and then becoming too hot-headed when you get a puncher and just thrashing the entire floor off the car on the right. But yeah, no, in terms of that rumor, yeah, I mean, pinch of salt was like an under exaggerated in terms of like report from Italy. I feel like I just picture like some old guy at a cafe in the middle of Italy just saying something to his mate, and then some reporters just overheard it, and that's what he's reported. Like it's always the most glaringly crazy rumors that come out of Italy apparently every single year, any time of the year. So yeah.
I like that image. I can imagine it as well. What do you reckon, Stuart? I mean, what's interesting about this article or this rumour is it's Leclerc that's annoyed at Ferrari and it's Leclerc that's looking for a way out. I just don't buy it, mate, at all.
Yeah, I mean, we know that Italian media's relationship with Ferrari is very passionate, let's say. But I think this is a clear case of the media being given an inch and taking a mile. I think this is something like seeing how upset he was on the Saturday and seeing how angrily and aggressively he drove on the Sunday, and then saying Leclerc's really upset and peed off, and therefore he's fed up with Ferrari after 6 races. Where actually, I think there have been a few races this year where things haven't gone the way he wanted. He was clearly disappointed in Bahrain when the car let him down, and there's been times when he's had to sort of give way to Vettel for the benefit of the team. And actually, he hasn't seemed that upset about that. He was upset, obviously, that the car didn't let him get that win in Bahrain, but generally he's been happy to play the team game. He knows this is his first year in Ferrari. He probably has, it's a bit late now, but he has that scent of being close to the World Championship fight and probably being able to get some wins this year if things go right. So he definitely wants that, but I don't think he's the same way that Rosberg versus Hamilton was. I don't think he's like desperately trying to like win everything, beat everything. I think he still has his head in the right place. He seems very, clear about what he wants from this year, and it's not necessarily getting every possible point that anyone can get.
The thing is, I can understand he's got every right to be annoyed with Ferrari for what's happened this season and what happened in qualifying. And equally, Ferrari have got every right to be annoyed after what happened in Monaco. But I don't think he's been as bad as some have made out this season at all. There's some people, I don't know if people just want to knock him down after building him up, which tends to be a British media trait. I don't know if that's just something that everyone seems to be picking up on now. But it's his 6th race for Ferrari. He's been all right. He's been at times quicker than Vettel. He could and should have won in Bahrain, but Ferrari messed it up there and Vettel threw the win away as well with his spin. So I don't think Leclerc's been all that bad. And all this talk about him being moved on is madness. I tend to agree with you, Aarava, when you say 5 years, but worst case scenario, he's not going to go anywhere by the end of this year, maybe end of next year if he doesn't really develop how Ferrari were hoping, but I can't see him going anywhere anytime soon, and I think it's even less likely he'll walk away. But I can get the frustration from both drivers over what has been a very poor start to the season for Ferrari, particularly compared to what we expected coming into this year.
Yeah, totally. It's like compared to the Vettel one, like the Vettel room is like absurd. This one's like 10 times that, just because like you've got just such a difference in age and point in their career. It would just be so, even for Leclerc, if he was upset at Ferrari, I think it would be a silly move for him anyway, even if he was upset with Ferrari to move, because I think you just got here, kid. Like you're in a Ferrari. I mean, even if it is dog, you've got to this point where you may as well stick it through and kind of, just see how it goes, basically, instead of making a pull trigger decision in a year or even 2 years. I would think would still be kind of a rash decision from him, I think.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think you've touched on it actually, Stuart, but I was going to put this question to you as well. Do you think too much has changed at Ferrari and maybe sticking with Raikkonen I know we're going with the benefit of hindsight here, but do you think maybe sticking with Raikkonen, given obviously the tragic passing of Marchione, meaning they needed a new boss at the top, and then they've gone and changed their team principal in February, the rule change as well. Is it just a case that too much has changed all at once for Ferrari and it's going to take some time to adapt, do you reckon?
Whenever you have, especially in management, whenever you have like management changes, it does take a time for, you know, the way they work and the way they work with the people around them and below them to sort of all align and to get the whole organization as a whole kind of working together. And I think, God, I forgot his name, the very, very Italian guy with the white beard.
Aarava Bene?
That's it. Yeah. So there were a lot of talk. It was very clear they weren't really gelling together with him. He was too aggressive and he wasn't getting the best out of the people. So, and then it takes a time to adjust to a new management style. However, one person changing won't make a huge amount of difference because everyone should know what they're doing, and the life cycle on the development of these and the running of these cars is very long. But I do think Ferrari, on the whole, because they have had quite a lot of personnel change over the last few years, need to sort of get some momentum going and need to kind of figure out who they are and then stick to it and make it work. I think it was definitely a good move switching out Ferrari for Leclerc, because even if they knew that this year was still going to be a development year, getting Leclerc in and building him up was a good move. Maybe a bit of a risk, as we've seen with people like Gasly, but I think it was time to bring in some fresh blood.
Yeah, it gives him time to develop as well within the team, doesn't it, and grow for when they are better. But I think Binotto as well, he seems to have his hands in multiple departments. He's not just the team principal like Aarava Bene is. And I wonder if that splits maybe his time a bit too much. But I mean, that's something maybe for another day, because I could talk about Ferrari and that sort of thing for ages, because it's just such a mess this season, and maybe it is a transitional year. But a lot of people are disappointed with this season because of what we expected after pre-season. But I don't really think there's a lot more to say on Leclerc, unless either of you have got something you want to say to totally rubbish this rumour before we move on to one that is totally credible and I completely believe.
No, hit us with it.
Wow. I mean, the Leclerc one was mad. The Vettel one, maybe a bit of credibility, but also mad. Nico Hulkenberg, straight face, Sean, is apparently being lined up by Red Bull to replace Pierre Gasly for next year. Not just is he being lined up, apparently negotiations have started in Monaco. I've said to you guys before we started recording this, I've got one word here and it's not a million miles away from bullocks. Stuart, I mean, come on. First of all, 6 races at Red Bull. It's a bit like Leclerc. 6 races at Red Bull and people are already asking for Gasly's head and talking about Kvyat and Albon maybe stepping up. 1, by the way, I can't see Marco swallowing his pride twice on Kvyat, and 2, if Gasly ain't ready, Albon isn't ready. But Nico Hulkenberg, out of all the available drivers, I mean, come on.
Yeah, it's interesting to know where this came from. I know it came from the Italian media. Again, they do like a story. But what a strange name to pull out. Maybe they were seen having a coffee together in the paddock or something, as this when these things tend to start, when you see two people having conversations together, and it must be about contracts.
That cafe that Aarava was talking about.
yeah, that same exact one.
I think this starts from a place of the sort of general disappointment with Gasly. I think we're feeling. I think we thought maybe he'd be a little bit more on it this year. He's clearly nowhere near Verstappen, and I think Red Bull haven't said very much about it. But I think in general, people have been were expecting a little bit more from him. But as you said, it's only 6 races in. Red Bull is a funny old organization, and he will need time to bed in. Just because Leclerc's managed to hit the ground running and smoothly doesn't mean everyone could do it. And Max Verstappen is a hell of a talent. I don't think this is going to be very helpful to Gasly to be hearing about people circling for his seat. I would say it's probably in Red Bull's interests to start thinking about that seat, because if Gasly doesn't improve over the next few races, then they're probably going to need to start thinking by mid-season, do they want to put someone else in that seat before they've been contracted someone else? But I can't imagine negotiations have begun yet. No,
that's the bit that got me. Negotiations have started, but there's so much young talent out there, Aarava, that, I mean, don't get me wrong, Hulkenberg, everybody knows he's a good driver. He's good in that midfield. He's consistent, but there's so much young talent out there. Hulkenberg, this is going to sound awful, but Hulkenberg's had his chance. He's had his time, and people talk about not getting a podium, but he threw the podium away possibly in Baku last year by sticking it in the wall. Might have been there instead of Perez, and of course was leading in Brazil 2012 and crashed out. So he's had his opportunities, but I just don't. If Hulkenberg was 5 years younger, I'd possibly believe this a little bit, but I think if Red Bull were going to replace Gasly, they'd either look to Toro Rosso next year, or they'd perhaps go for, dare I say, an Ocon as an example, just a younger driver that's worth investing the time in. Not that I would ever, by the way, stick Verstappen and Ocon together as teammates. That's just, that's no.
Yeah, it's an odd one. Especially, as you say, Hulkenberg's like is kind of like last third of his career, or at least second half of his career. And I don't know. I could maybe see the argument of Red Bull. Maybe they're frustrated with Gasly not having just the results, so they just want to get a driver in that they know will give them results alongside Verstappen. So Verstappen's the main guy who's going for the podiums and the wins, and then they have Hulkenberg there as a backup, kind of like solid rear gunner, right, rather than Gasly. Kind of, some races he's kind of just looked lost and he's been nowhere in terms of like you look down the pecking order and you're like, where on earth is he gone? And then he turns up at the end of the race in like P6. Like, okay, fair enough. So maybe just like a strong rear gunner, but even that's like a real devil's advocate for Hulkenberg going there. I will say this: it would be quite comical for me to see Hulkenberg in a Red Bull because. Well, generally, if you don't know, my general thing with the F1 community is I've sometimes predicted some weird things with things I've done with my videos in the past. And in a series I did have Hulkenberg go to a Red Bull team in a seat a few years back. So it'd be quite funny for me to predict something like that a few years in advance. But I think, it's a bit of a shambles kind of rumor. Like you said, I think one of you said, like, literally someone spotted Hulkenberg having a coffee literally in the paddock with someone at Red Bull at all Horner, or literally said one word like hi in the paddock, and that was it. And they built the rumor out of that because I really don't see how negotiations would have started. Because Gasly's been a little bit meh maybe compared to what they wanted, but I don't think they'd pull the trigger that badly. Like, I know they like castrated Kvyat and did the whole swap with Verstappen, but that was at least a year and a bit after Kvyat got into the team. So I think that's just out of all the rumors we had, like you both said, just that this is the most absurd one of the lot, which is kind of crazy because both of them have been absurd so far.
Absolutely. I love Silly Season, I'm not going to lie. And from a YouTuber perspective, Silly Season's brilliant, so I'm not going to knock it. But it's just been, the fact it started end of May, it just seems to be crazy it's got going this early. But going back to something Stuart said actually about how Gasly isn't on pace with Verstappen, I want to say, Stuart, was he ever brought in to be on pace with Verstappen? Really? Or was he there just to play number 2 and pick up those 6th places and fastest laps when they can and get, bank the points?
I definitely don't think they expected him to be on par with Verstappen because Verstappen's very fast. He's got quite a few years on Gasly. And I think, as Red Bull said last year, Gasly was moved up earlier than they would have wanted him to be. They wanted him to have another year in Toro Rosso to develop himself, but their hand was forced when Ricciardo moved. So no, I don't think they expected him to be amazing. And it's clear they haven't spoken out loud, particularly about how they feel about Gasly. I think they know he's developing. Having said that, especially this year, it's sort of becoming clear that having your championship contender number 1 driver and then sort of a backup number 2 driver is, this year particularly, and maybe going forward, we're shifting away from that model because Bottas is keeping up with Hamilton. Leclerc and Vettel they're a bit separated in the points now, but actually on track, they're kind of on par. And if you've got 2 very strong drivers in Mercedes and 2 very strong drivers in Ferrari, if you don't have those strong drivers in Red Bull, then you're going to be locked out of the top 2 places in the championship. And that's, money, plaudits. You're definitely not going to be able to win it. So I think that's something they have to bear in mind if both drivers in those Ferrari and Mercedes are going to be as strong.
No, that's a fair point. They are 2 very strong lineups, aren't they? Especially Bottas this year. Big surprise. But do we think, I don't know about you, Aarava, but I think Gasly, Monaco and Spain and certainly Baku coming back through the field as he did, he's definitely improving. He's getting there, but he's still got a long way to go. He's not been good enough. I'm not going to start defending him in that front. I think he could have been better than he has been, but he definitely seems to be improving.
Yeah, no, I think he's getting comfier and comfier. I think that it's very apparent from what he said at Bahrain about not being at one with the car and kind of more the car driving him than him driving the car. I think for me, having a soft spot for Gasly anyway coming into the season, I was saying to people, that you should give him time because it is a true thing. Like, car to car, it is very different. Even Toro Rosso to Red Bull will be a different thing. And so I think you have to give him the time to grow. And yeah, he's, like you said, good examples. He has shown that he's, even when things haven't gone right for him at the beginning of the weekend, whether it be his own fault or, the team's fault, at Baku or Monaco or whatnot, he's shown signs that he's getting the hang of it and that he's starting to get that raw speed. He just needs to get it all together in one weekend and start to just kind of work away at that raw speed a little bit more. I don't think he'll ever match Verstappen, to be honest, unfortunately for him, in terms of raw speed, because Verstappen, obviously, we all know he's a massive talent. But I think he'll get to the point where Red Bull want him to. So that's why I also think this entire rumor is just kind of absurd, of the fact that I think Horner and Marco also knew that this was a big risk. They even said it. They didn't think Gasly was ready, but like we mentioned, they had no other option really. The Red Bull program dried up pretty quickly, and so they had to stick him in there. And so I think they are also going to be willing to give him that time to grow. And Horner's been very encouraging of Gasly every time he's talked about him. So I don't see that needing to change anytime soon.
That's a very good point, actually, because Christian Horner, I seem to recall he said something along the lines of when they first made the decision that they're being forced into promoting him a year earlier than they'd have liked to.
Yeah.
So even they knew, like you said there, even they knew this was going to be a risk. So I think he'll get some time. The report, by the way, or the rumour does end with the end decision will be dependent on Gasly and how he performs over the next few months. But this is the same report that also said negotiations have started. So I don't quite know how they mould together. But like Stuart said, it's always worth keeping options open, but Gasly has since had a say. I probably should read these to look at both sides. Maybe on the outside, looking at the results is the only thing you can see, but on the inside, we have a lot more information. So Red Bull know things didn't really come my way. We had a couple of issues there. There's a couple of things that explain sometimes the lack of performance we have that we know inside the team, and there's no need to really get stressed or worried. There's surely things I need to improve and adapt to this package, but that's why I'm confident things are going better and better, and we'll be able to extract even more performance in the coming races. What I will add to this, and I've got to be honest, Stuart, as mad as I think this is for 6 races into his Red Bull career, and as unlikely as I think the Hulkenberg move is, we are talking about Helmut Marko here. And if he gets an idea in his head and he decides he wants rid, he'll just do it. So he's quite unpredictable like that, isn't he? Anything could happen.
Yeah, but I like to. It's really hard to read him as a person, but I like to think he's learned a few things over the last few years. I think the Kvyat saga was it worked in his favour because he managed to get Verstappen into that seat, which worked out really well, even though actually it was a bit of a risk at the time. But obviously Kvyat's sort of been brought back in again because they ran out of drivers. And as Aarava said, Christian Horner hasn't been slating Gasly at all during this year, and they know he's a year ahead. And I think, and this is something I think I talked about at the end of last year, about how Red Bull haven't been really nurturing their drivers and coaching them and supporting them. They either have to deliver or they sort of get chucked in the bin or ignored, which I'm not feeling with Gasly. I'm feeling like maybe they came into this year with the understanding that Gasly's here a little bit prematurely. He needs time to develop, so they're going to work with him to develop. And actually, I think the first 2 races of the year really went against Gasly's favour. That's because after he didn't finish, he finished 11th and 8th and qualified 17th and 13th in the first 2 races. But then, ignoring Baku, where he got penalised like 17 times, he's come 6th and 5th, which is, kind of where you expect him to be when there's 6 good cars.
Yeah,
so
totally.
Actually, if you chopped off the first 2 races, he wouldn't look as sort of adrift as he maybe has. And I think if we go, 3 or 4 races forward, I think we'll sort of start to see a consistency forming. Or at least that's what I'm hoping.
Yeah, totally. I think also in the background, I think Red Bull know that he's also an asset this year with probably the way he can talk and work with the Honda engineers, because he's had 2 years of Super Formula and then Toro Rosso Honda last year of working with Honda engineers. And the Japanese culture is very different to maybe the European culture. Not maybe, it is very different in terms of how they go about working hours, the way they go about things, the general vibe. And so I think Gasly's used to that, and Red Bull can use that to their advantage of knowing how to communicate properly. So I think Red Bull also want to use that as an asset. And just reiterating, like you said, about the whole year ahead of things, settling in, it seems like Red Bull a little bit less trigger happy. Helmut Marko maybe, because I remember back when Gasly was in GP2, I actually had a conversation with Jack Aitken about this, because at the time Jack sort of knew a little bit of insight into it. At the time when Gasly was in GP2, Jack was saying that Helmut Marko didn't really think Gasly had the tenacity and the aggression that you needed to get into F1 and kind of really make it in F1. But then Super Formula, I guess, really convinced him, because Gasly did a really great job in Super Formula. It's a tough formula to go to, because obviously it's such a foreign place to go into from a European standpoint. And he did a really great job. He would have won the title if he didn't have to miss that race to go into Toro Rosso, ironically there. So Red Bull kind of messed up his own championship fight in that sense. So I think Gasly has a lot going for him away from the on-track performances. And so I feel like it's just a case of let him grow into that role. And I'm confident that he can become what Red Bull want him to become, which is not attacking Verstappen by any means. I think it's literally like Stuart just said, sort of like coming where he's come basically in the last few races. Like, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's worth mentioning as well, again, 2021, do they need to move him on at the end of this year? Chances are, with respect to Red Bull and Ferrari, Mercedes are probably going to win this championship this year and probably next year as well. So keep him there, give him another year, see how he gets on. And if he's shocking come the end of 2020, then maybe look elsewhere. But back on Helmut Marko, I can't help it. I'm like that with him. But he's backed the team into a corner, hasn't he? With the way he's just like, nope, you've had your 2 years, off you go. Nope, off you go. And now he's looking into his pool and going, oh, damn. The next one is Dan Ticktum, or Dick Tantrum, as some people like to call him. He's the next one in line. And then after that, I think you're looking at 12, 13-year-olds. So it's Marco's doing, dare I say.
Yeah, in terms of like blaming anyone for getting the Red Bull program kind of off the rails and drying up, you can't blame anyone apart from him and like just the management staff of that entire program. Because there was a few years where they just kept chopping. It's like, well, what do you expect? It's not like an endless. You're not chopping an endless carrot. Like at one point, you're gonna run out of carrot to chop, and you've cut off every single driver you had going for you in the little chain, basically. So
that's a fantastic analogy. I love that. That's brilliant. But I mean, you look at some of the drivers. I'm very aware now. This isn't even written down. I'm just off the top of my head. All right, yeah, your Liuzzi's and your Scott Spees and your Christian Cleans. No, off you go. Thanks very much. But Jev, Sebastian Buemi, Daniel Kvyat proving this year that he probably shouldn't have been dropped, and he is clearly good enough to be in at least a Toro Rosso. It's not like they're throwing away terrible drivers, is it, Stuart? So
no, but you're absolutely right. I mean, there's a lot of ex-Red Bull talent doing very, very well for themselves in other series, which is good for them. Formula One isn't the be-all, end-all of being successful in motorsport. I think, but it also speaks to something that's come up quite a lot, which is sort of the way Formula One is getting a bit locked in, and actually, because you have these streams of young driver programs and sort of semi B team things going on, there's actually people can't move as fluidly as they like. So actually, if you're a Toro Rosso driver and you can't go to Red Bull, you end up being a bit stuck unless somebody sort of buys your contract out from under you, and Red Bull aren't going to promote you, and then Red Bull will just get rid of you, and then that's it. It's a strange and very different world than we've been used to for the last few years.
Absolutely. We'll end this rumour part then. I'm going to throw a question at both of you, put you on the spot. I'll give you time to answer and I'll give mine. Basically, do you think there's going to be any changes in the top three teams? I'm going to say no. I think we'll still have Hamilton, Bottas at Mercedes next year. I think Bottas has already shown that he's got something and he's got enough for another season. I think Ferrari will stick and I think Red Bull will stick. But what do you think? I'm going to go to Stuart. I won't put Aarava on the spot straight away.
I tend to agree. I think we went into the season thinking Bottas was racing for his seat, and I think already he's proved he's worthy of it. He could always throw it away in the middle, but I think it'd be too late by then. I think he's having a great year. I think Ferrari would be fools to change their lineup if they can hang on to both of those drivers. The real question there is, and it's a very loose question, but if Vettel actually wants to stick around. And as we said, Red Bull wouldn't want to get rid of Max Verstappen. Gasly, I think, is a solid second driver to have there. So I think if the teams had their way, they wouldn't change their lineup. And it would all be dependent on whether or not drivers have had enough or get a better offer.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think I don't see them, unfortunately, I don't see them changing because I do like driver changes, especially when it's at the top, but I don't see any reason why any of those three teams would want to change. And even the drivers, I don't really see much point of any of them swapping around unless, like you said, like one of the other top three teams comes in with an offer for them. I just don't see how that's going to be. That won't change, in my opinion.
No, I'll say it again as well for the 300th time this video already. 2021, teams are now focusing on that, so they don't want to be messing about with drivers as well. They want a bit of consistency somewhere. So we will move on from Speculation Central and go to some questions from a few people, starting with one specifically for Aarav from some guy, I don't know if you've heard of him, Stuart, John T. Beard? Some dude over on Twitter.
Doesn't ring a bell.
Says, would Aarav like to see a fully developed F1 Legends or historic game? It's a gaming question. Maybe made in decades, start with the 50s and do some subsequent decade as DLC. I think it would be so much more fun to play than modern F1.
I think it'd be fun, but I don't know for how long. I think a lot of nostalgia plays into that. I think you have got that same theme going on with a lot of games, not just F1 and racing games. A lot of nostalgia playing into it. For me, obviously, I only got into F1 and F1 gaming specifically in 2010. I got into F1 maybe a few years before that, so I don't have a lot of nostalgia really for that period of cars. I'd like to try them like they have them right now in the F1 game, but for me, I don't think. I personally, I wouldn't really mind. I'm not too fussed. And they've got so much more to focus on with what they need to work on right now for this year's game and beyond before they start thinking about doing this whole mega classic throwback, fully licensed, all that stuff. And also, that's another thing, licensing. I can tell you now, like speaking to Codemasters, that's real hassle. Getting all the old licenses for like 50 years ago is a nightmare. So I just don't even see it happening anytime soon as well.
How long has it taken him to get the Senna licensing as well?
Yeah, well, yeah. Case in point, taking forever.
I think if I were to answer this, I'd like to see something like F1 Career Challenge back again, just over a few seasons.
Yeah, through the years.
Maybe even Cody's 2009 to 2019.
Yeah, I mean that idea would be a really cool idea for sure, because they obviously have all the assets and stuff that they've done. Obviously, they'll have to rejig everything and make it for the new generation, but that would be pretty damn cool, like EA did back in the day. But also at the same time, that takes a lot of work as well. So I think in this age, I think a lot of people would kind of be really harsh on them if they took away resources from the main game to work on something like that.
I don't know if I've ever asked you this before, Stuart, but do you have an F1 game preference?
Yeah, I played the Codemasters F1 games a fair bit. I played them quite religiously up to 2014, and then I didn't get a new generation console for like ages, so that's kind of where I left it. But I've been playing 2018 a little bit now, and yeah, I have always liked them. I've got a steering wheel now, so I'm at least like pretending to be one of the big. I know. Imagine. Yeah, I did always used to like them. I'm enjoying this new handling model they've got. I know it's actually came in 2015, but this is my first time sitting down with it. It's good fun. Yeah, most of my 2015 plus experience of F1 is watching channels like Aarava, sort of vicariously living the dream.
Yeah, I'm just terrible at it. I'm not going to sit here and try and make out I'm any good. I'm shocking. I play on a pad as well, Aarava. How bad's that? Oh, dear.
I mean, I'm not judging, but I mean, ask anyone. They'll say I'm not that great. I'm good enough to make a video. That's about it.
We'll move on. Umar on Car says, can you see any way back for Ferrari to win this championship, or is it gone? I'm just going to go with it's gone. I think Mercedes.
I'm going to go no. Yeah.
Mercedes all the way. Chance. Bottas versus Hamilton. What do you reckon, Stuart? Are you a bit more optimistic? Maybe? Possibly?
I kind of want to be. My initial reaction was not to just throw it all away. I mean, we're only 6 races in, and this season is about 400 races long. So it's funny, isn't it? Because if the next 6 races somehow Ferrari figured out what was wrong with their car and then dominated in a similar style, I mean, it's quite tricky, but circumstances could align in that way, and then suddenly we'd be asking a whole different question. So there's always a chance. I think Ferrari would need to be showing significant momentum the other way, basically from now till the summer break, for us to be thinking, okay, it's game on. Realistically, if I was a betting man, if you said put 100 quid on it, definitely would go towards Mercedes.
I agree. I think we're all in agreement, aren't we, that it's a long way back. What's the gap now? Vettel 82 points, Hamilton 137. So that's not happening. I think the constructors is over 100 points now. We've had 6 races, so. But yeah, of course, Lewis Hamilton as well. We've still got his second half of the season yet when he really steps up a gear. So I can't see it. We'll move on from that one. But thanks for the question. Furlong, #TeamLH, says, with Williams declaring upgrades and a boost of morale in their camp after Monaco, do you think we'll see progress to the point of 9th, maybe in the constructors? What do you reckon, Aarav? I think that's a stretch, isn't it, even for 9th?
I think they're firmly going to just stay put where they are in the constructors. I don't think they'll be moving up. Bless them, because at least they got some hope. But no, I don't think. I think they're so far back that they just can't. I don't think they've got any light at the end of the tunnel this season. I think it's more a case of survive the year and keep afloat financially, and then look what they can do next year, because they've just foundationally got this entire car wrong, I think. I mean, it's slower than last year's car. That just says all of it.
We'd love to see it, wouldn't we?
It would be amazing. Everyone loves a good underdog story, but this is like, there's underdog stories, and then this is sort of like underneath underdog, underground by about five stories. So yeah, this is it's going to be a tough one to pull around.
It's a little bit. I don't mean to poke fun at them. It's a little bit like they went, 2019. Damn. Sorry, I was focused on last year. Points, Stuart. Do you reckon they can at least get a couple of points on the board?
I think they're going to need some attrition. And the good thing about Williams is they have finished the races. They finished all the races. So if all hell breaks loose in front of them and they manage to sort of just survive all the way to 10th place, then I think that's their best option. But to be honest, I am very worried that they're not going to score any points because races are not as full of retirements as they used to be like 10 years ago. So it'd be nice to see them get something, but I'm almost certainly not going to expect them to get enough points to come ninth. I think
their only hope,
long gone.
Their only hope is sticking on the realistic damage mod on the real grid and then have 10 DNFs ahead of them, then they'll get a point. Sorted.
They should speak to you. Have you got experience with Survive?
Exactly. I'm sure I can hack my way into real life and install this mod onto the real cars, and they'll be sorted, no problem.
Keyboards only.
There you go. Anyone from Williams listening, we've sorted you. It's all done. Last one comes from Conrad O'Keefe. Good lad over on Twitter, actually. It says, how do you feel about the trend of drivers being put under public pressure after 5 or 6 races? I didn't even read that properly. That seems very apt for this video. What do you reckon, Stuart? It's madness, really, isn't it, for 5 or 6 races into a team, as we've said about Leclerc and Gasly already, that people are after their head. 6 races in. I think you can look at maybe Canada, 7 races in, a third of the season, and say, are they under pressure? Is it time to step up? But to be talking about them going after 6 races just seems mad.
Yeah, it's brutal, isn't it? And it's particularly like with people, as we've discussed, people like Gasly who've been put on a massive platform much earlier than they expected, and sort of everyone's looking at him in a way that you wouldn't necessarily. So yeah, I think it's very early, and particularly I think a lot of these first races are flyaway races. They're not necessarily reflective of how the drivers or the teams will be for the rest of the season. There's, the cars get upgraded so much by the time they come back to Europe. It's all this mid-season. I think keeping your eyes on the mid-season part, especially the sort of European races, I think is where you see the true reflection of the drivers and the teams. And I like to hope that the teams that the drivers are in are supporting their drivers to not get too swayed by criticisms that might be coming in from the media or social media, which is even worse.
It's like we said, like not even with Ferrari fans, just everyone in general. Like obviously these days, it's such a different landscape with Twitter and Instagram. You can very easily just jump on a bandwagon and all hammer one driver, or you can just easily get your opinions out, basically, compared to how it used to be. I remember, when I joined Twitter back in 2011, the timeline was very different. There weren't that many people, and now there's so many people out there just saying their all opinions about any driver X, Y, and Z every single weekend. So I think it's just so easy for you to do it now that that's why that culture's kind of come about. Not just with F1, any sport really. You see it with football so much of the time. You see it, players, coach, managers, and it's the same thing in F1. Same thing with any sport now these days. There's so much criticism, and I think it's why a lot of sports stars they either go the route of trying to fight back a little bit, or be the kind of happy-go-lucky person on social media, and they try and meme back and stuff like that, or they just don't read it and they just block it all out and they just continue their job. And I think that's what I think all of them should do. I mean, just don't pay attention to it, because even the media is bad for it as well. Like you said about having that spin of building people up and tearing them down. The media is obviously just looking to try and create storylines they can play off all year. And as a sportsman, they should just kind of, try and, blinkers on and just kind of zone it out, if you will. But yeah, it's gone quite bad in recent years, but I'm not surprised about it.
I think with the social media thing as well, a lot of what we read on social media are people giving a deliberately controversial hot take, if you like, just for the retweets.
Yes, yeah.
I was just going to say, we're also kind of in this new age of armchair criticism. I mean, we all run YouTube channels. I think we're aware of how people can rush to strong opinions in the comments quite quickly and maybe a bit hastily. And I think that gets amplified across social media. So I think sometimes criticism seems a little stronger than it actually is among people closer to the drivers.
I feel like you're talking to me, Stuart, trying to give me some advice, telling me to ignore him. But yeah, I think we'll leave it there. Predictions for Canada, super quickly before we disappear. Have you got any crazy predictions, Aarava, for Canada, or do you think we're looking at Mercedes all the way again?
I think we're looking at Mercedes whitewash. To be honest, I think unfortunately, Canada's not been great in the last 2 years. And I think that Mercedes car is going to be so strong around there. Ferrari do have some straight line speed, but I don't think they have enough downforce to actually turn that car then around if they compromise too much. So I think it's going to take another crazy Canada race to not see a 1-2 for Merck and a whitewash, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm hoping that Canada does its usual trick of throwing some weirdness into the mix and at least giving us some entertainment one way or another, be it ludicrous weather or people ignoring the pit lane red light or some safe. We haven't had outrageous safety car incidents for a couple of years. So I think something to mix it up, but that's the only thing I think that's going to stop Mercedes. That, or what did they have in 2014 when their MGUK just broke on both the cars? Something like that. But yeah, I mean, the real question is, when are Ferrari going to get that win? Because you've got to expect them to have a win at some point. Are we going to have to wait till like Singapore?
I think it could be a 2014 kind of year for Ferrari where they don't win. It's not that bad yet, but operationally, Ferrari are worse than they were in 2014. Like operationally, some of the things they've done, and the mistakes that their drivers are also doing here and there, I would not be surprised if it's a winless year for Ferrari.
Do you think Verstappen will get a win? Because if he hadn't got that 5-second penalty in Monaco, he would be third in the championship right now.
I think Red Bull have a better chance of getting a few wins later on the year, because we all know Red Bull have had this thing, they've had a pattern of getting a lot better at the late end of the season. Like earlier at the beginning of the season, we're kind of all hoping that Red Bull could finally hit the ground running this time, because they've always gone better at the end of the year and they've got to the point where they can win a race. They just need to hit the ground running so they can actually have a title fight. That hasn't happened again. I think, again, you'll see a place like Brazil, Mexico, Singapore, they'll be strong, and Verstappen for sure will be there. Like you said, Stuart, like Monaco, he was so close. Penalty would have obviously ruined it, but he was so close to getting into the race lead. I think Red Bull will have a much better chance. Verstappen will have a better chance of getting a few wins than Vettel or Leclerc will to even get one win.
What's been a breath of fresh air this year as well is we haven't been talking about Honda.
No,
because they've just turned up like a normal engine manufacturer this year. So Red Bull able to get on with it, and I think you're right. Actually, I think we'll probably see Verstappen win before Ferrari.
Oh, to steal a phrase then, on that bombshell, I think we're going to leave it there. Wow. Wasn't expecting that in your predictions. Thank you very much, Aarava, for coming along, mate. It's been a pleasure to have you on and finally get to talk to you and hopefully have you on again one day in the future. I know you've got a busy June coming up, so I'll leave you alone. But yeah, it was a pleasure, mate. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
And as always, thank you very much, Stuart. Canada next. Hopefully it'll be a decent one, but thank you very much for your company in this one as always.
Yeah, pleasure coming on. These podcasts are good fun.
Lovely. Thank you very much to Stuart, and of course to Aarava as well for coming along for the first time. Now I will be back on Tuesday, I believe, with next week's news roundup, all the build up to Canada, of course. There's also a Formula E stream next Wednesday, so if you're interested in Formula E, do come along. If you're not, there's no pressure to watch, obviously, as always. Other than that, you can follow me over on social media. The links to Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and of course the Discord are all in the description down below. And don't forget, you can listen to this over on SoundCloud and on Spotify as well. But as ever, thank you for watching. I've been Sean. This has been the F1 Word, and until next time, goodbye.